and welcome back to the Museum of Native American History. I want you to know that we are live, so if you want to come on down and join us here, you're more than welcome to be here. We would love to have you, but if you can't, stay online and be sure to watch because we have some amazing things coming on. But you know, it's time to get on with everything. My uncle had two dogs. One was Rolex, the other was Timex. They were his watchdogs. So we just saw Manessa, thank you very much. And today we're gonna have our first in-house event. It's Hear Our Voices and Flute Accompaniment. So you're gonna recognize our Cherokee storyteller, Gayle Ross. She has been a stay here with our Hear Our Voices and leadership that she gives us with all of our storytellers. Gayle is a great friend to the museum, and we have a new friend in our little Gaby here, and she's going to accompany Gayle. She is Eastern Band Cherokee, and she is Cherokee, so Cherokee Nation. So we want to have them tell you some stories, play some music, and enjoy. Again, come on down and join us. Gayle?
Gaby's going to start us off with a song, and then we'll be doing some storytelling with musical accompaniment. But I'm really so thrilled. I've gotten to know Gaby. We've performed together at the Momentary and other places, and she's so wonderful. I love to see someone as young as Gaby taking on these traditions, making sure that they continue. And I can tell a lot of the older guy flute players, you need to watch out because this girl is good.
Thank you.
Didn't I tell you? I'm going to do a story now that is probably my signature story. It's the story I'm known best for, and it's one that Cherokees love a lot. It's a wonderful story. It is a love story, and Gaby is going to pair it with an old traditional Cherokee love song. So first the love story, and then the old traditional love song. Way back in the beginning days of the world, there was the first man and the first woman. And they were husband and wife, and they loved one another dearly, which was a good thing because their options were limited. Now the story says they spent their days discovering the wonders of this beautiful new world that Creator had made, and they spent their nights discovering the wonders of each other. But for those of you who are married, you know that things don't always go that way. There came a time when that first man and that first woman had their first fight. And later, neither could remember what the quarrel was about, but harsh and ugly words were spoken, and pain and anger flew back and forth between them until finally the woman turned and walked away, leaving the home, going east toward grandmother's son as she rose. At first, the man sat alone in his house. He told himself how peaceful and quiet it was without that quarreling woman. But you know, after a time, the anger left his heart, and all that was there was sorrow. And he realized how much he loved his wife. And he realized how much he would miss her. And finally, he dropped his head in his hands and he began to cry. And Nuachota, Creator, heard that man crying and took pity on him and spoke and said, "Man, why do you cry?" The man said, "My wife has left me." Creator said, "Why did your woman leave?" And the man hung his head and wouldn't answer. "You quarreled with her," Creator said. And the man nodded. "Tell me," said Creator, "if your wife were to return to you now, would you quarrel again like that?" And the man said no. He wanted to live the way they had lived before, in peace, in happiness, and in love. And so when Creator heard those words, he said, "Well, I can tell you, I have seen your woman. She is walking east." So the man began following his wife, but he couldn't catch up with her. Everyone knows an angry woman walks fast. Finally, Creator said, "Let me see if I can make her slow her footsteps down." So Creator, he went ahead and he found the woman. Her footsteps fast and furious, her gaze fixed straight ahead, anger still in her heart. Creator thought, "I'm going to place some berries that grow along the trail, because the woman will stop and pick them, and the man will be able to catch her." So he caused blackberry bushes to grow on both sides of the trail. The woman didn't even see them. She was still walking as fast as she could. So Creator put raspberry bushes beside the trail, caused them to burst into bloom and ripen into fruit, and the woman swept right by them. He put sarbassberry bushes beside the trail. The berries ripened into fruit, and still the woman did not see anything but her anger. Creator said, "I will make a new kind of fruit, one that grows close to the ground, because only by bending her head for a moment will the woman forget this anger." And so a thick green carpet of vines, weaving themselves together, grew along the trail the woman was following. They burst into little white flowers that ripened into a berry that was the color and the shape of the human heart. And walking on the trail, the woman crushed the berries under her feet, and this wonderful smell rose. She stopped and looked down, and there were all those beautiful red berries growing at her feet. She couldn't resist. She picked one and ate it, and its taste was as sweet as love itself. And so she began walking very slowly, picking those berries as she went, and she saw her husband coming behind her. And you know, when she saw him, the anger was gone from her heart. All that she remembered was the love that they shared. And the story says they picked and ate those berries together, returned to their home, and lived out their days in peace, in happiness, and in love. I was married for 38 years. I bet they had another fight or two. But never again did the woman walk away from their home. And that's how Creator put strawberries in the world. The color and shape of the human heart, the sweetest of all the berries. They were put here to bring peace to quarreling men and women. And now for the old traditional Cherokee love song. great old Cherokee love song, huh? I want to do a quick story for you little guys. I'm so happy to see that you are here today. So I'm going to tell you a story about somebody we Cherokees tell a lot of stories about. His name is G-Stew. Can you say that? G-Stew. That means rabbit. G-Stew is the Cherokee word for rabbit. And we have dozens and dozens of stories about rabbit. Because you see, back in the beginning days, rabbit was always in trouble. You don't know anybody like that, do you? He was in trouble because he talked all the time. He never stopped talking. He talked, he talked, he talked, he talked, he talked, he took a deep breath, he talked some more. He didn't care what he was talking about. He just liked the sound of his own voice. He talked so much, Nuachota, creator, came along, scooped him up, said, G-Stew, you don't listen. I'm going to help you listen better. Took a hold of Rabbit's ears. That's how come Rabbit's ears stick up like that. But he still didn't listen. He still talked too much. And his favorite thing to do was to play tricks on people. Most of the time, his tricks end up hurting just himself, like the time he made Bear so mad. Bear reached out, grabbed that long bushy tail creator gave Rabbit and broke it off. That's how come you don't see rabbits with long bushy tails. Just that little white puff of fur looks like scar tissue, doesn't it? Sometimes, though, Rabbit's tricks work out just the way he wants them to. And this is one of those stories. You see, it all started when Rabbit and Wolf went hunting together. Does that sound odd to you? That Rabbit and Wolf would hunt together? Well, you have to remember, this is back in the beginning days of the world when all creatures spoke the same language. And except for killing and eating each other, they got along pretty good. What happened was neither Rabbit nor Wolf had been able to provide much food for their families, and their wives were not happy with them. And when a Cherokee wife is not happy with you, your life is not good. So Rabbit and Wolf made a vow as brother hunters. They would go out together, they would find some meat, they would split it between their two families, and everybody would be happy. They hunted all day long, and finally, just before sunset, they scared up one skinny, scrawny little cow. Wolf chased her around and around and around he went until the cow was exhausted, and Rabbit hopped up from behind a bush with a great big club. Whonk, boom, the cow was dead. Rabbit looked at that little cow. Didn't look to him like there was going to be much meat by the time they skinned and butchered her. So he turned to Wolf. He said, "You did the hard work of chasing down the cow so that I could kill her. I will do the hard work of butchering her and getting the meat ready to take home. Look over there," and he pointed to the western sky. You know that big red glow in the sky when the sun is going down? Rabbit said, "There's some people on top of that ridge with the campfire. See the glow? They've got a campfire. Run up there and borrow some fire from those people, and we'll cook the meat before we take it home. Well, no one ever heard Rabbit offer to do the hard work. Wolf was happy to run up the ridge. But when he got there were no people there. There was no campfire. But that red glow was still in the sky. So he thought, they're on the next ridge. Down that ridge, up the next. No people, no campfire. But that red glow was still there in the sky. So Wolf went chasing the sunset. Up and down each ridge and hill. And that red glow got smaller and smaller, and then it was dark. Wolf said, people put out their campfire. I will just go back and make a fire of my own. Now, as soon as Wolf had gone away, Rabbit got very busy. He skinned that little cow. He cut up all the meat into chunks. He wrapped it up in that cowhide into a bundle he could carry on his back, and he hid it off beside the trail. He swept that area clean. He took that scrawny little cowtail, and he stuck the bloody end of it down in the dirt. And when he saw Wolf coming back, he grabbed it. He said, help, this cow is jumping away under the ground. And Wolf saw that tail sticking up. He ran over, he grabbed it, he gave a great big heave. And of course it popped right out. Rabbit looked at it and said, you are so strong, you pulled her tail right off. But the rest of her got away. Since I am the one who let her jump underground, you should get this. And he handed Wolf that little scrawny cowtail. And he went and got that bundle of good meat and took it home, and he and his wife and children, they ate well that night. But Wolf and his wife and children, they had a very poor supper because, like us, they were left with just the tail. Thank you. We're going to close with a story that I actually learned from an Eastern Band storyteller, very dear friend. Gaby's going to give me musical accompaniment throughout this story. It's a very important story, I think. It's called The Cherokee Rose. In the spring of 1838, the storm that had been for so long gathering broke over the Cherokee Nation. Indian removal. It was the brainchild of Thomas Jefferson, but the architect was Andrew Jackson. And it came to the Cherokees as such a bitter betrayal. You see, the Cherokees fought with the British in the Revolutionary War. They noticed a difference. The British came for trade. The Americans came for land. But beginning with their treaties with the young United States, an olive branch was held out to the Cherokees. Live more like us. Become more like us. And in that way, you will be able to live in peace with your white neighbors. And for the next 30 years, the Cherokees went through an amazing transformation. They gave up, for the most part, their village style of farming and began developing small farms with domesticated animals, which they had never had before. The women liked the pigs. They didn't like the cows. Cows broke into the garden. The Cherokee genius, Sequoyah, developed the syllabary, a way to read and write in Cherokee, and the first Cherokee newspaper was founded. The Cherokees remade their government from the Red Council and the White Council into a two-part legislature, a judicial system, and the first ever executive branch with the principal chief. So the Cherokees, having worked so hard to be able to live in peace in their homeland, was all they ever asked for. But the states surrounding the Cherokees, they were not pacified by the steps toward civilization that they saw the Cherokees taking. It only made them more greedy. They wanted our farms. They wanted our ferries. They wanted our land. And particularly the Georgians, very brutal men, formed the Georgia Pony Guard, and they began to raid into the Cherokee Nation, hanging Cherokee men, beating Cherokee women, burning Cherokee farms, and the violence grew. And still Chief Ross said, "Do not give violence for violence. Only by maintaining the peace will we be able to stay here." Things got so bad, though, that finally the Cherokee Nation had to fight back. They didn't go to war. They went to court. They hired a former U.S. Attorney General to press their case against the Georgians for not respecting their sovereignty. And they won. They won. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote, "The Cherokees are a distinct nation with a government, borders, a language of their own. Georgia has no power over them." The Cherokees were elated. They had followed the steps of the law, and they had won. Whereupon Andrew Jackson became the first president in the history of the United States to ignore a Supreme Court ruling. He is said to have remarked, "Judge Marshall has made his decision, let him enforce it." And to the Georgians he said, "Light a fire under them, they'll move." And so the violence intensified, and finally, one small faction of the Cherokees, so disappointed that the Supreme Court ruling would not be enforced to protect them, they saw no other way out. One small faction of the tribe. They gave Jackson the treaty that he wanted. The Treaty of Nuachota, signed December 29th, 1835. Now, not a single signer of that treaty had the legal right to do so. Selling Cherokee Nation land without the support of the National Council was treason punishable by death. Jackson knew the treaty was a fraud, but he didn't care. He took it to the Senate, and there it was ratified by one vote. And when the grace period in the treaty had expired, General Winfield Scott and his cavalry ringed the Cherokee Nation, and they began to move inland, herding Cherokee families into great wooden stockades like cattle. And there, with insufficient food, insufficient water, insufficient sanitary conditions, the people grew sick, and people began to die before the very first steps were taken. So in June, under federal guard, the first detachment of Cherokees turned their faces west. They were supposed to follow the river route on flatboats, but it had been a winter and a spring of drought, and the rivers were impassable. And so they walked in the heat and the insect summer, the sickly season. And once again, they began to die. Mostly the very old and the very young. Women walked, carrying the bodies of their little ones, because they couldn't believe that they were gone. And after days and days of this suffering, the hearts of the women broke. They walked through the day, their gaze empty. When the day's march stopped, they sat and they stared into a future that was too bleak to imagine. And after days of seeing the women suffering, the men grew frightened. They went out at night and they prayed, "Creator, take pity on us. The strength of the Cherokee Nation is the strength of our women. If the women cannot survive, the Cherokee Nation will not survive." And Untitled took pity on them. He spoke, saying, "Tell your women in the morning to look back along the trail they have watered with their tears. I will send them a sign. So in the morning, the men told the women what Creator had said, and they felt better. They went about preparing for the day's walk, but as Creator had instructed, when they put their foot on that path, they looked backward and saw the most amazing thing. Strong green vines growing from the soil, weaving themselves together, growing back toward the homeland. And the vines had stems with 7 green leaves, one for each of the 7 clans of the Cherokee. And at the tip of each stem was a beautiful little white flower, white, the Cherokee color for peace. But in the center of that white flower was a little circle of gold. Gold. So the Cherokees would remember it was greed that had driven them from their homes. Now, when Chief John Ross learned of the terrible death toll of this first detachment, he gave in. He went to see General Winfield Scott. He said, "We will go, but you let us manage our own removal. We will move as a nation, not like prisoners of your army." And Winfield Scott, whose heart had been sickened by this detail, he agreed, knowing it would make Andrew Jackson furious. He still agreed. So the detachments were stopped. And all through that summer, they worked, building wagons, planning for supplies, dividing the people into groups of 1,000 to 1,200. And in September, the march began again. And it might have been not so lethal, but the worst winter in memory struck the Cherokees on the trail. And they traveled in snow and ice, camping on the banks of the rivers where the ferries could not run because of the ice. And so, of course, the people died. 16,000 Cherokees turned their faces west. 4,000 of them died. And that's why they call it the Trail of Tears. But in our new home in the West, the Cherokee Nation rebuilt, rising as they had so many times before, like a phoenix from the ashes. They kept their government. The newspaper started up again. Chief Ross built the America's first free public school system. We had the first institutions of higher learning, the male and the female seminary. Yeah, once again, the Cherokee Nation was a proud and strong people. And even though we have faced great difficulties like the Civil War, like allotment, always always the Cherokee Nation rises. Today, we are the largest Indian tribe in the country with a government, schools, a police force, our newspaper, and our own medical system. But you know, that little flower, it grew back along that trail and covered the mountains of our homeland. It's called the Cherokee Rose. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and you out in the universe that I can't see. Thanks so much for coming to spend this time. This was a really special opportunity. I love telling at the museum, but getting to work with Gaby is amazing. Give her a hand. She's incredible. I don't know where JR is. Oh, we have 6 minutes.
15 minutes? Do you guys want to learn about the flute?
Another song?
Well,
Yeah.
I started playing the flute when I was 10 years old, and I'm 18 now, so I've been playing the flute for about 8 years. And this flute, I've got to say, has taken me on so many journeys that it's unimaginable. And I've played in competitions, and I've had the honor of winning a NAMI, a Native American, it's the Grammys for the Native Americans. I was Female Flute Player of the Year, so congratulations to me. And I'm proud to say that I actually just put out my second album. It's called Wind Moon. That's the moon my son was born on. Can you hold up Emiliano? I'm proud to say, oh, he's asleep? Oh, never mind. We're not going to wake him.
Never wake a sleeping baby.
No, never. But yeah, my baby was born March 28th of 2021. He's the newest member of the Eastern Band Cherokee tribe. But yeah, I'll play you guys a couple of songs and tell you more a little bit about the flute. Would you guys like to pass one around and look at it? So, being Native American and female, we weren't always allowed to play the flute. And there's a lady, an extraordinary lady. You guys should definitely look her up. Her name is Mary Youngblood. And she was one of the first females to actually play the Native American flute and get big with it. And she used to play at powwows and go to festivals, and the men in the powwows would turn their backs on her. They wouldn't look at her as she played because it was so disrespectful then for a woman to play the flute. And whenever I first started, I mean, there's been times where men have come up to me and be like, you know, in my tribe, it's not traditional for women to play flute. But I don't listen to them. I love playing flute. This flute has taken me on so many journeys. Actually, this lady, I have all these flutes back there that this remarkable, one of the very first stories like I remember looking back on was this lady in Florida. She walked up to me after I just got done playing on a big stage, one of my very first times being on a big stage. And she came up to me holding that purple bag right there with a couple of flutes in it, just crying. And she said that I touched her heart so deeply, and she had really bad arthritis and she just couldn't play her flutes anymore. And she's saying that these flutes will deserve a journey and deserve somebody who will love and take care of them. And she gave those flutes to me with tears running down her eyes. And you know, me being so young, I didn't really recognize the honor that was for her to pass down, to see that in me so young. And I'm truly greatly honored. And yeah, so I don't know, do you guys want to see a double barrel flute? That's like one of my coolest flutes I have.
And Gaby, being Cherokee, she doesn't listen to those old Plains guys.
I don't know.
What do they know, man? Cherokee women rule.
We do, we really do. You heard it from Gayle herself, we rule. So this is a double barrel flute. The flute that you guys are passing around only has one chamber in it, and meaning that there's only one side of it that plays. But since this is two barrels, I'll pass it around after I get done playing it, but you can see the two chambers in it. Whenever I blow on both of the holes, it activates both of the chambers. There's like a wall that separates them and everything. So it's pretty cool. This is one solid note, but it harmonizes with all of these notes over here. And this was made by my good friend Joe Lofton. Actually, this one and this flute right here were made by Joe Lofton as well. back on the birds on that one, you'll actually be able to see the chambers like in the flute. It's really cool.
You know, the Plains people have a story that a young man who was unlucky in love heard this beautiful tone on the wind, and he looked up, and there was a tree branch, and he could see with the hole there that the tree branch was old and rotten and hollow, but it was making this musical note as the wind passed through it. And supposedly the boy cut it down and went around trying everything he could think of to make that sound again, swinging it through the air. And then finally, he had the bright idea to blow his own breath into it, and that brought that tone. And through trial and error, he learned how to bore holes along the length of that so that many different notes could be made. And the story goes that he went in the night and sat outside the lodge of the young woman he loved and played that flute. And she came creeping out of her teepee and went to listen to him. And he wrapped his blanket around the two of them. And you know, it wasn't long before they were married. So that's what the flute, originally for the Plains people anyway, it was a courting flute. But you know, I think women should be able to play the flute for the man that they like. I mean, what the heck? This is 2021.
Oh, you want me to? Promoting time. This is my new CD. We have it here at the museum. I do have more copies in my car. They're 15 each, and this is also my other CD. I made this one when I was just 12 years old. Yeah, but actually, going back to that story, the story that I learned was this young man was having trouble courting a girl, courting flute, and he actually talked to the woodpecker, and the woodpecker showed him how to make the flute, and yeah, he won the woman over. And normally I play Unchained Melody after that song.
Yeah, that's another variant.
Yeah, but this flute right here actually was the very first flute I started with. I was 10 years old whenever we found this flute. We went down to the Fayetteville Square, and they're made by a man named Jerry Dowding. And my mom actually heard that her favorite band was going to be there, and we worked really hard all day long, and we got there, and the band wasn't there. And my mom was so disappointed. She was so ready to leave, and she heard the flute from a distance, and she looked around. She's like, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" And she just took off. So me and my brother were running after her, trying to find her, and there she was talking to Jerry Dowding is his name. And he was talking to her about the flute and everything, and we were asking questions, and I was so short I had to peek over the table to see what was going on. And this flute was sitting right there on the table, and I loved it so much. And my mom said, "Well, if I bought you one, will you be serious about it? Will you learn it, and will you love it?" And I said, "Heck yeah, of course I will." And my mom was like, "I don't know." And then she asked him, and he said, "If you buy it, I'll teach her." And he taught me all the contemporary songs I know, like Unchained Melody and Greensleeves, Amazing Grace, and songs like that. And since I learned like that, I didn't know how to freestyle for the longest time. And he would try to get me how to do it. But how I learned to freestyle on my own, just play, just let it run through me, was going through different festivals and powwows and meeting other flute players and seeing how they play. And that's actually how I got this collection of flutes. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So
Thank you, everybody.